What's up, everybody? It's Chad. I'm back again with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Today, I'm here with my friend Andrew from Carver Family Farm. Thank you so much for joining me today.
What's up?
We're just hanging out, man. You know, I'm just glad to have you here on the show and everything. Thank you for joining me. It should be a good episode today. We got a couple of things to talk about. We're actually going to have a live soil chat a little bit later on in the conversation. But without further ado, we'll just get you guys to know my guest. If some of you know Andrew, great. That's awesome. He's an amazing guy. If some of you don't, well, let's fix that right now. So Andrew, if you could you introduce yourself to, my listeners?
Yep. My name is Andrew Brown. My Instagram is SWNugget. I'm the pop of the mom and pop of Carver Family Farm. We're a small little micro farm over by Bloom Fiesta, Alameda and Jefferson. We focus on organic living soil and collecting genetics. We also breed. I'm a breeder, so we also breed and offer a lot of the stuff that I breed and plants and things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I was there the other day, and I noticed you had seeds and stuff like that, and all kinds of other stuff. And I mean, we'll dive more into the whole store itself because it's just so unique, and I love it. Like there's just nothing else I've seen in the state quite like yours.
Nice.
So let's get into it first. Let's get to know you a little bit. So, how long have you been growing cannabis?
So I started using cannabis in I think like 91. I was a freshman in high school, and I first started throwing seeds in the woods in about probably 93, 94 was senior year. Nothing really ever came from it. I think one of the best plants I had, we put in a big tote and brought all this dirt out there and shovels and grew these huge plants. And then it rained for like 4 days, and we went out there and we forgot to poke holes in the bottom. So everything just rotted out. And But it wasn't, I actually went to Savannah College of Art and Design for children's book illustration and art history. And so it was about 95, 96 when I first actually put some weed in a closet with some lights.
Yeah. And back then, growing was totally different. Well, I would say totally different, but the equipment we used was a little bit different. We're moving more towards the LEDs these days. And, everyone had the hot ass lights you can cook eggs on. And, even I had them up until about 4 or 5 years ago. But,
the closest grow store is 3 states away. And you for sure got you were being trailed if you went to that. And so we actually went to every block there was a park in Savannah with a statue, and around all 4 sides there was a street light, like a HPS light, or actually metal halide light.
Yeah.
Had a buddy that was on fish tour that could actually he opened up the ballast and somehow swapped something out and was able to switch a metal halide to a HPS. And you could actually buy 400 watt HPS bulbs at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Were used for street lights. So we had these big brown with a glass swing on it, and we'd hang this 20-pound thing in a closet and bang out the weed. Yep.
Oh man, the fans and everything. Yeah. And yeah, going to grow stores.
We didn't have carbon filters back then, so you just let it rip. It just stunk up the block. That was another thing. Virginia, I think, and Georgia were 20 to life for cultivation, and at the time in the 90s.
So what brought you to New Mexico then?
I graduated in 98, and a buddy that had graduated a year before me for museum studies was going to come out and try to go to UNM for his master's. And, I was growing weed, and so pretty much everything was kind of free with a trade, and Savannah was kind of imploding on itself with people doing bad things. And I didn't really want to either stick around and get myself in trouble or go home and get your shit together and then do something. So I just decided to move out with my buddy.
Nice.
And so I pretty much graduated and then drove to St. Louis, met him, and then we drove out here. So
nice. Was it a culture shock for you, moving from,
not that really, honestly, I was looking forward to it. I'm really into Native American art and culture and architecture. I actually focused pretty heavily on that in my art history side of things in college, and did a lot of Native American art history classes and culture, and so coming out here it was pretty amazing. I grew up in DC, and so DC is like a mixing pot of culture, and so it was a breath of fresh air to come from Georgia, which is a different culture, out to, it's really open and low key. People are accepting. A lot of the East Coast can be judgmental. A lot of expectations and things like that I didn't really come across here.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
yeah, a little slower.
for me, the week I moved out here, Dale Shahuli was actually at the museum, the New Mexico History Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually rode my bike or skated downhill and went and saw the exhibit like every day for like 2 weeks.
Oh,
and so
wow,
that was
really?
kind of like yeah, you're going to find glass. And I ended up meeting this guy, Lewis Wilson, who's a pretty famous glass blower. And he just took me under his wing and started not really like teaching us glass, but introducing me to people and kind of forcing me to bring myself to like step up and bring it to the table.
Yeah. And you know what, I was going to ask this towards the end, of this segment, but, I might as well ask it now because we're on the conversation. You are a glass blower too, as well, right? Glass artist. I'm not too sure of the real term. But, how long have you been doing that since around that time?
I first started glass in 99. I think I moved out here, got a job at a photo lab because a lot of my roommates in college were into photography. And so I was kind of a natural photo editing, Photoshop and things like that. I actually worked at Picture Perfect, which my old friend of mine actually purchased and now owns, which is pretty cool. So he runs that photo lab.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. That's dope. I'm glad he's still around.
Yep. And I was growing weed the whole time. I just didn't talk about it. Actually, me growing cannabis I never really made a lot of pipes because I always thought it was going to get me in trouble. Yeah. And so I always stuck to beads and marbles and paperweights and like less functional things.
Yeah. And I've seen a couple of your works in the shop and everything. They're actually really cool. So I could see why, well, I don't want to see why, but I could see that you did really focus on those kind of things because of the style that you used. And, you actually, that's where the name came from, Carver, right?
Yep. That's my nickname. My buddy, Ben Burton in Colorado nicknamed me Carver B. So, because my last name is Brown. And we actually, that guy Lewis put us on to, we were really young at the time and just trying to like come up with a new technique. And he actually had a gym cutting friend of his that was in Socorro. And we actually drove down there like every day for almost a month in the middle of the summer. And this guy let us use his equipment and kind of like come up with our techniques. So that was pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. No, that is pretty cool. And it is an interesting technique because, you showed me in the shop and I was like, oh my God, the texture on this, it's like no other, when it comes to that. And it even felt like clay, like this isn't clay, this is glass. Like this is kind of cool, so it's cool that you can achieve those type of things, with that technique. And do you still do glass these days?
I do. The idea is to kind of get the shop self-supporting itself and then kind of dance between the two or have art shows at the shop or have my work available in retail and things like that. But none of this is very easy,
Yeah. No, none at all. And you're doing it the right way, one foot in front of the other. Don't try to, jump, try to walk 2 feet in front of you. That's how you fall. It's great that, you're going that route and, that's an inventional thing. I'm sure you have the equipment still, you can do it at home as a hobby kind of thing. But that's great that it opens it up for you as a product and thing too.
Yep. Yeah. Cannabis is, I kind of see that in the long game as one of the many arms of things like Inspector Gadget. Like I grew up with like graffiti and art and music. And I think in the future, growing solely relying on only cannabis isn't really going to be an option.
Yeah.
That's the way the market's changing and things like that, especially the small operator.
That's true because you are micro.
You kind of have to branch out. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think we're having a little bit of connection thing. I think there's a little bit of a lag. That's why. My bad. Go ahead and finish what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh no, it's all right. We're good.
Okay. But yeah, so that's cool that you started there. You're growing at the same time. Just like most growers back in the day, most of them weren't very vocal about growing in the sense, like it was like, because I started on the medical side, so I was like legally able to grow essentially. But I get it. I get not wanting because I didn't want to tell a lot of people about my grow too. Even today, like it's still a little like, I don't know if I want someone to know that I'm growing or something or whatever. There's still that little paranoia that happens. But legalization does help,
We
end
used to
that.
drive
But
around in circles. We're not pretty big disconnect. I just don't think a lot of people realize what some of us went through to get to where we are. Or, I mean, so I'm in a situation where the news will come through and interview me. Like, that's not a comfortable situation. Like, I was taught to go the speed limit, drive around in circles, have someone following you if you're moving weight. I mean, there's a lot of rules to all of it that are now out the window because it doesn't matter. And now we are completely open source and teach people's parents how to grow cannabis in their backyard, which makes me about as happy as I could be.
No, that's amazing. And I'm glad we're at that point too, because, historically, years ago, we couldn't do that at all. I help my dad grow cannabis now, like it's fun. It's great, and, we can all do it now too. And, having people like yourself, with all the experience, you've been growing way longer than I have, to show people, your craft and everything. And when you've been growing throughout the years, you grow in live soil now. That's no secret. We'll have a whole conversation, in the next segment on it. But when did you first start growing live soil? Because I know every grower goes through different cycles of different techniques. When did you land on live soil?
2015, 13. It's been about a little over 10 years. Maybe I'm not really too sure. I've kind of grown every iteration.
Yeah.
And then live soil just kind of, if you're looking at the plant, reading the plant's health, and then making decisions instead of looking at a chart and relying on the chart to tell you what your 3 products do.
Yeah.
So if you have an issue with when you only have 3 products, like, and all of your nutrients and micronutrients are in 3 separate things, like, how do you really separate that and understand what you're doing?
Yeah.
And the forums came. I was reading on the forums, and that's when there's a guy named Clackamas Coots, and he basically taught a lot of people living soil and also how to, like, reverse engineer things. And so you can pretty much find anyone's nutrient and then look up the CAS number and find out the actual element that's in there and get the element from the source.
Yeah.
And so it kind of taught you to break down what's in really expensive things and either make them for yourself or brew them for yourself, or at least have an understanding of how to use things separately. And that kind of just blew my mind.
No, it blows mine too. And to be honest, it opens up a whole new world of growing, essentially. Instead of trying to add something that the plant may or may not like, you're adding what the plant needs, but you're adjusting it to what the plant is telling you. Like, you do that regular growing, of course, but when you're dealing with the part A, B, whatever, you're just pulling back or giving more of that one solution, versus going off of, oh, this just needs nitrogen, oh, this just needs some PK, or whatever it may be, or some kind of micronutrient, which doesn't need a lot of, but it still needs that, but if you add it in just some big bulk thing, you don't really know how much of that tiny nutrient you're really giving it, unless you go and break down some crazy math and figure it out in your head that way. But this seems like a little bit more of an easy thing because it's through nature. And like I said, we'll talk more about that on the next segment, because we have a whole segment for a live soil, and growing and everything. Because I'm not going to say it's a newer thing, but it's something that I've seen more on the commercial side lately.
It's a new fad that hasn't been a fad to a lot of us, I guess.
Exactly.
Which is great, because I think the more people they can grow this way, the better the planet's going to be, and the more people will actually eat vegetables at home and things like that, because everything grows the same when you start looking at it like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a plant. And even my doctor told me that we're just big, complicated plants ourselves. I'm like, that's true. We need sun.
Water and sun, right?
Yeah, we need water and sun too. Macronutrients as well. So, and like we bacillus in our digestive system and everything too. So, but I digress on that, and we'll touch more on the live soil thing. I just wanted to bring that up because you're one of the few in the state that are actually doing that. Do you know how many live soil producers there are in the state right now?
I honestly don't. I was lucky enough to be invited to the Build a Soil live. It was a live soil event, and I was actually on all 3 of the panels. And I met quite a few New Mexicans up there. I don't know. Cool. I don't think a lot of them had facilities, but there's a lot of living soil growers down here.
Yeah. And to be honest, New Mexico is really big on outdoor soil kind of stuff anyway, I've noticed. Most other states, they're about the hydro, the salts, and this and that. And I've had people from other states that was like, bro, like people talk about outdoor New Mexico, like it's just the best ever. I like, they're like, I don't know what. And, growing in live soil, and I've had your product, and damn, you can put out a good product, in several different growing methods, not just indoor.
I think a lot of people assume when they hear organic that it doesn't produce. And I actually heard someone was talking about our farm, and they were saying, oh, well, they're organic. They only get like one crop a year.
Yeah.
Like, we're churning and burning. Like our schedules are like hydro. Yeah. Our weights are arguably like hydro. I mean, it's not the same, but we're not like lackluster by any mean,
No, it's a very clean grow. It smells amazing. I was telling you when I was there, it's a mixture between a smelly good nature and cleanliness. Like right. Achieving those two things is really hard, because nature's nature. But if you can harness that smell indoor and achieve the smell of cleanliness too as well, like what the hell did I just walk into? This smells amazing. It just looks good, and you have everything on point. But I'll digress on that. We'll carry on with the live soil chat on the next segment, so we don't spoil it for everybody. But what made you go into the legal side? I get it. Cannabis became legal, but you could have still said, "Screw it, I'm just going to stay on the side I'm on." What made you want to go to the legal side?
A couple different things. Like I feel like that's kind of the natural progression. I have a kid who's 13 and don't really want to be trapping and moving cash around. And cash is an interesting thing these days. It isn't like you can't, like I was self-employed. Like my wife and I have a glass business, and just being self-employed, it is hard to take a loan. It's hard to refinance your house. It's hard to buy a car without a W-2. Yeah. And so just for that reason alone was like, let alone coming out light and going legal. Times are different now. I feel like one of our mentors is Kimron DeCesar, was the chief research scientist of Steep Hill. And the knowledge he has imparted to me and my wife about how to use this plant in a healing matter, I feel like I would almost be selfish if I didn't let that out. Yeah. I think there's a lot of terpene knowledge and compounding of different cannabinoids and things like that I'd like to see get out there. And the only way we do that is step out and do it.
Yeah, 100%. You guys are doing it.
Thank you.
Seeing the grow, and thank you for having me over. By the way, me and Tracy. That was such a fun visit. It was an amazing visit, and it's more eye-opening too, because you can see somebody who's doing the organic thing and doing it right. You know what I mean? Like that's something that you could say you're organic all day, but doing it right is something different. You
remember when the original grows had to be organic?
Oh my God, yeah, I do.
That's when I started researching organics.
Yeah,
the very first. That. What year did our program start?
2000. Well, so the bill passed in 2007. I think around 2008 and 9 is when it really started to get.
That's
rolling.
When I was like, if I'm going to do anything legally and it's going to be in the state, it has to be organic. And so do this, which back then was, what is it? Roots Organic and Mother Earth. And cocoa and still mixing organic stuff, but not no-till.
Yeah. And like the notes,
and it has a decent organic line. Like we were mixing pre-bought things, but like now I'm top dressing with like straight alfalfa, straight kelp meal, like raw ingredients that we're mixing in a ratio that depends on how the plants are talking to us. Yeah. So that was it. Back when you had to be organic, and that was, I don't know why they pulled that away. That would have been interesting to be the only state that was required organic cannabis.
I know, right? Because that seems like it would be, I wouldn't say more medicinal, but it just would make more sense for us in this state. Versus because some people are paying a lot of money for nutrients, for the salt nutrients or the water, essentially. Because some of them buy just the big jugs of water, and you're paying for water at that point.
I'd rather pay for people, human beings. Yeah, like I would rather pay higher cost on high-skilled labor than a bag of really expensive salt. Yeah. That's kind of our mantra. Because 280 is going to take it no matter what, so you might as well spend it. So you have to have cost of goods sold, or else you're literally just wasting money. So in my opinion, and that's something that's an interesting conversation, that living soil lets you write off your cost of goods by using human beings and paying people instead of buying salts.
That's interesting because, like we have to dabble around this whole 280E thing.
I have to write
And
something off.
yeah,
Would I rather write off a product or employing somebody? And we come from employing somebody
yeah.
and teaching and giving
And,
them like a career that they can move forward.
and speaking of like your theories and, the way that you go about business, I've noticed it's totally different there.
Some hippie
You allow,
bullshit is what we call it.
yeah, the hippie bullshit.
Yep.
But I love it,
but there's a lot of hippie bullshit, which is
Yeah, and I love that
thing.
about you. It's like it sounds like it's hippie shit, but it's like, but I can show you the study. It's
Yep.
like, oh, all right, it's not bro
Yep.
science. I love that. I hate bro science. Like put Kool-Aid in it, bro, mix it purple, or whatever the fuck, because
I love white papers. I'm a nerd for white papers.
yeah. And if you guys know, white papers are like studies and stuff. But
Google Docs.
Yeah.
When you research something, look at the Google Docs side. Look up pest pressure or cannabis and issues, but go to the Google Docs side.
Okay.
Actually,
like
my best piece of advice is if you have a pest that no one's heard of, every state has a vegetable or plant that they make a ton of money on, like our green chili or potatoes in Idaho, and every vegetable or fruit has a specific pest that's attacking it.
Yeah.
And every state spends a lot of money to research that. And so, for example, like before root aphids were a big thing, I dealt with root aphids. And that's where I was starting to look at that. Like I was telling you, Clackamas Coot was telling you kind of to reverse engineer things. And that's what he said to do is go find who's affected by root aphids. And who's affected by root aphids is wine grapes. Well, California spent a ton of money on how to fix that organically. And the answer was Bavaria bassiana. Took a month to figure it out by reading white papers. But yeah, everyone else is drenching avid. I drenched a bacteria that was a 16th the cost.
Yeah.
And had no negative effect to our environment, and so like things like that are how we come to real scientific answers.
Yeah. And to be honest, that might be a game changer for the industry. It's like, why are we just throwing chemicals at it when we can just throw nature and science at it? We can throw chemical and science at it, but that's not the same effect that we're trying to get for this particular product. This is, but
we're pretty much only allowed to use Dr. Zymes, and there's only like 3 products we can use in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Like our list is nothing.
Yeah.
So if you have a major problem, you better kind of understand IPM and like a holistic way to fix it, because we don't have like Dr. Zymes ain't taking out a russet mite infestation quickly,
Yeah.
So you better understand like the life cycle and like how to properly take it down.
Yeah.
Or don't get in the game because you shouldn't be using chemicals. Like that's a no-no.
Yeah. And that's what sets you guys apart is, you're doing this as right as possibly you can, and you are doing it as correct as you can too. And you guys are compliant as shit, your compliance is on point. Like I love going in there and seeing that. When I went in, I was like, oh, this looks beautiful. The art on the walls, the different colors, the plants and the different plants that you have. You don't just have cannabis clones there. You have regular plant, like, chili and other vegetables and stuff you can buy. And you guys actually use the soil from your old plants for those plants, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So some upcycling going, and that's even more cost effective. You're making that soil last even longer, and then getting paid for that soil in the end. At the end process when you sell it to someone, and those plants are beautiful.
Unfortunately, what we've learned is cost effective doesn't mean anything with the current landscape of cannabis. You can grow cannabis for free, but if you don't have any cost of goods, you can't write anything off.
Yeah.
And so you'll lose money.
Yeah.
So it's this weird, like, I'm looking forward to when we're treated like a normal business and we can grow our product like an agricultural commodity.
Yeah. And there's a few people that, don't want to see that day just for selfish reasons, usually. But I see more good coming from it than bad, especially for the business owners. Because you guys will be able to be treated like a regular business and get all the benefits of a regular business too. And that 280E BS goes away. Because how much percentage wise do you usually pay about a year to that, like out of how much you make?
I mean, I don't know percentage wise, but like it's basically break even. If you make 100,000 in profit, 100,000 goes to taxes, and you make 0.
Yeah, Yeah.
But
So
it's
it's
the
like
retail, having a retail facility. If we didn't have retail, we'd be totally different, and we'd be able to write more off because there would be no front of the house.
yeah.
I feel that without having retail, especially in the first couple of years of a unlimited licensed state, how are you going to have a voice?
Yeah.
And like,
That's
we
true.
have things to say. I don't just have a product.
Yeah.
I want to teach people. I want to like push. I want to see the world greener, you know, some hippie bullshit, like I was saying. But like, you don't do that unless you step up and do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I want to prove to my kid, like, we're not just selling weed.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
like no one wants to just
change
do
the
that,
world
man.
in one small thing at a time.
In a small area of America, but it starts out small, you know, like every tree starts out as a small seed, you know,
Right.
and then it grows into that beautiful, huge thing. So that's what we could hope for New Mexico and everything, because, you know, the nation is really looking at us, you know, for what we're doing and how we're doing it. And, you know, I see the chatter online, you know, and people are actually praising our products now here in New Mexico. You know, it's not Colorado's got that fire. I'm starting to see New Mexico is slept on and has that fire,
And
especially
we
when
have people around the country watching us and using our model to jump in their states. I have a friend in Minnesota that hit me up and was like, "Hey, I just went for a micro."
Yeah.
And it's like, that's amazing. You know?
I'm happy that they have micros there. You know, like not every state does that.
I
You know,
don't
like
know. So the lucky thing that our micro is protected in the bill.
yeah.
Most states like California started with the cottage, and then it just disappeared and got like ramrodded out of the whole situation. It's gone, and now it's just corporate. It's going to take some work to change our plant count, which is unfortunate to other micros. I don't really see. I think 200 plants is okay. We're actually under plants, but I can understand how some other people wouldn't want it. But for our micro license is safe in the bill.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is
The plant count and everything.
Very rare.
Yeah. It is. And, you know, that was one thing that we really pushed when we were pushing for the legalization thing. It says, you guys need to understand we need micros, and we need to really lean on the mom and pops, because we're going to have all these corporate companies coming in, and that's what happened. And they're going to try to take over, grow tens of thousands of whatever, the hundreds of thousands of plants that they try to grow, or they do grow, whatever. And they're going to just take it over and eat everybody, you know, and then we're going to end up, you know, with all these issues. So having the micros was a game changer. And, you know, even at the legislature, they acknowledge that, you know.
Right. I think there's an interesting, I don't understand why people of MSOs don't come in and almost like partner, not swallow up a micro, but swallow up their product.
Yeah.
Like,
there you
boom,
go.
I'm going to write a contract with you where like I'll buy all your GMO.
Mm-hmm.
And then my big MSO that grows fields of knowingly, most of these people that grow huge ass fields know it's not this top shelf. They're growing biomass, so they're growing for distillate, or they're growing for a piece of the market, and know it's not top shelf, which is fine. There's tons of different versions of cannabis, but those people with the biggest money should be buying like a whole field, which is only 200 plants of a micro.
Yeah.
And then co-branding and be like, no. This year we got all of so-and-so's X genetic.
Mm-hmm. And
I
you only
think
find
we're
it
currently in an immature market, and once it settles down, that type of stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, no. We only have like 10/8 of this. So-and-so has the rest of that. You should go check them out. And then that'll like start this almost like a fine wine thing. You know, because right now I think the bigger guys with the bigger fields don't really want the names of the smaller guys, because no one's really working together. They're working over top of each other. Yeah. I think the bigger picture is working together builds bigger names, which will help these people sell more distillate. So
I agree.
There's a lot of not short-sightedness per se. I think it's just a lot of immaturity, and not in people, just like the market's immature. We've only been at this a couple like. For us, like everyone's like, when are you going to blow glass again? As soon as my shop is like running itself. We're 4 years in. Like, this is not easy. And so getting this whole plane off the ramp isn't like the quickest thing. And so I think hopefully in like 2 years, we start to see more of like a mature market. Like if I was Sprouts, I would buy all of one farm's broccoli.
Yeah.
And be like, no, we have Sickler Farms broccoli because like I'm like that's who we support. But
Yeah.
we're not there
Yeah.
yet. So
Yeah, and we're not, hopefully we do get there, because we need them to support local as well, like these corporate guys, that are trying to take over or whatever. They have their own branding, but they can offer other stuff too. Like there's a niche for everyone. And sometimes you'll attract other customers just because of that brand.
right.
Like I came here because you have this, like you're the only place in town that has this, or I came here for this and you also have this. So I am getting both at this place, and that saves a trip for me, et cetera, whatever the reason may be for the consumer. But that's a good point. Most of the big guys, they want to do net 30s, like they want to pretty much just take the product and never pay the person. And there's really not much we can do in the state to get that money, when it comes to like what's in the CRA. They'd have to go to the long, lengthy, court system stuff, with all the lawyers, and it gets expensive. And then in the end, you may not even get anything back really, or you'll just be breaking even. So it's like, well, why fight it in the first place? And that's what they're hoping for.
A lot of these
And
small places can't float 30 days.
no, they can't.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate
That's
part.
not
Yeah.
really fair too. This isn't
No.
like Walmart. These are small farms.
Yeah.
And floating 30 days when I got people's families that I'm worried about, like it's not really how it works.
Yeah. Like,
and if you pretty much in most industries, like if you float, no one pays.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
what happens in all the legal existing states. And so I think people are up against a fence and they're like, yeah, I guess I'll take net 30 instead of nothing.
Yeah. And then they get nothing.
Yeah.
They still get nothing. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, like their hands are tied at that point. Like this is the only person that'll buy my product in the whatever X amount of days or months or weeks. I need to get rid of it. Like this is the only option. And then nothing, and then, there's a shit sandwich all around. And that's unfortunate. And
the hard part is, everyone thinks everyone wants cheap, but like, sure, I guess in New Mexico, there's not a ton of money.
Yeah.
But we do have an educated customer. I keep hearing that like, oh, you have to teach them, but like, yes, they want to learn. And so I think just like beer or alcohol, there is probably the same range of graph. Not everyone wants the $15 4-pack of beer. Most people want, not everyone wants like Bush Ice or whatever, but that's a big chunk. So it's a variance of what quality people want. And there's room for everybody.
Yeah. Like I remember getting $20 30 packs back in the day for beer pong. But, I also have bought $20 6-packs,
and I wouldn't drink that. I might drink that at a barbecue or something, but I wouldn't sit down to a steak dinner with a Bush Ice. I'm a little older than I was back making those decisions,
Yeah, exactly. I want something a little more fancy. I don't drink these days, but if I do, it's going to be more of a craft, something tastes better, something, worth a shit. Nothing that's just, I'm just drinking this just to drink. And that's kind of how the cannabis thing should be, for certain people. And to be wrong, like what you like, smoke what you smoke. But we're going to start seeing that too. And yeah, you're right. In a couple of years, our market, and it's already showing signs of starting to mature. The things that are changing. Even some big MSOs are starting to get out. The playing field is kind of starting to level. Well, it's always been kind of level, but the industry itself is starting to level out on itself. And of course, once we figure out this whole enforcement thing, which we'll talk about later in the episode, we'll see even more leveling out in the playing field if it's done right.
In a way, it's okay. Like if we had started from day one in a mature market, what does that mean? That it was all MSOs? Because you don't start 0 licenses in a state with maturity. Maturity comes from California that's been legal for 10, 15, 20 years or however long. And so for us to start mature would have meant the CCD would have been like ahead of the game, which would have made it really difficult. It's kind of been good that we've been learning together.
Yeah.
It's been hard. It could have been way easier, but what's the flip side of that?
What do you learn when it's easy? Or what do you learn when you just win?
They had police abilities 2 years ago when no one really knew what we were doing. We were just starting. Like that would have ruined people. Yeah. And so now 100%. We're maturing. Now they might get some authority. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Had they have been like from the get-go what they might be in a couple years, that wouldn't have worked. or
No, you're
had
right. No.
the locals not had a chance to cut their teeth, and we
Mhm.
were only competing against MSOs because that was a maturity, it wouldn't work. So we
Yeah.
need a period of immaturity.
Yeah.
I hope
And
that me saying that doesn't sound disrespectful. It just is what it is, and it's almost good that we have some immature time because we can learn, we can make mistakes, we can watch other people make mistakes and talk to them about it. We're a small state. We can actually talk to people in the legislature and imagine being in New York.
dude, I talk to people from those states all the time. It sucks.
Right. Like even Minnesota, there's so much like corruption and this person quit and this person was going to do this and change this. Like we know the people that are doing things. Maybe not personally, but we know who they are and what to expect and how to approach them and things like that.
Yeah. And I tell people this time and time again in New Mexico, it's very easy to lose an election in New Mexico.
Right.
Like it's like other states, California, New York, I've talked to people in the industries from those places like, wait, you guys can just like go up and talk to your legislators? We're like, yeah, sometimes like they're on my Facebook. Like, what? And I'm like, they're like, you have to have like money here to like talk to them. I'm like, dude, they work for you. Like, that's kind of ass backwards. But I get it, like that's not saying it's right, but I see it, like that's unfortunate. And of course here in New Mexico, we have our own issues, but I think the benefit to us is, we're able to crawl, walk, and then jog because we're not sprinting yet. We're still jogging, a little trot. We're able to do all of those and figure it out. And our government was able to do the same and kind of react and change that way. Has it been easy? No. We're still going to have our issues. It's not going to be perfect. When legalization happened, I told people this is just the beginning. And it's like that even with the psilocybin stuff. This is just the start. This is just the beginning of the fight. Now we have to ensure that this stays fair. We don't get screwed over, all the good stuff. So we'll see what happens in the future. And I'm excited, for this industry to mature and you guys to be here with us maturing as well. And you're putting out an amazing product. You won a bunch of SEs the other day. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You all do deserve that. That's not something that's like, just given to you. You guys did deserve that because I've had your product. I've seen the grow, I've seen the shop, and you guys are just knocking it out. And I wish nothing but luck for you guys, and to see you guys keep killing it, and want to see you down south a little bit more.
Love it. I think that's an interesting thing too. We kind of saw it happen in the glass industry with shows. Is that there's a couple popular shows in different parts of the country at different parts of the year. They were extremely popular, and the promoters made a lot of money, and the glass blowers made a lot of money. And everyone was like, "Oh, bet I'll do one here. I'm going to do another one, and there'll be two in Vegas." And then they got diluted, and the buyers didn't go to all of them. The buyers started only going to this one and that one, and it got kind of disconnected. Yeah. And I feel like we just did that with our show, with our contests.
I think so too. And I was talking to someone about that.
And so I saw people at the SEs that weren't there before. It was just interesting. And something that took the glass industry like 4 or 5 years happened in 1 year.
Yeah, about one. Well, so on the medical side, it still had its issues because the SEs has been around for almost 10 years. So it still had its, come vote for us and get a free pre-roll kind of situation. But yeah, now it's even worse because there was people that like were sitting there like, what the hell is that? What? Or I've had that product. It wasn't really that good, but whatever. But we also see all these other competitions come in, and now they've been devalued. I saw
they're announcing winners at one of them for categories with one entry.
Yeah, like how's that a competition?
Right.
At that point,
But I know there's enough in the state to have that be a category. We just spread the landscape too thin.
Yeah, and I get it, and I get it. Everybody wants to try to, make something great for New Mexico, this and that, but you have other out-of-state entities coming in, and trying to do competitions here too, and it's not really helping with the being diluted or whatever. And one day, maybe that'll get fixed, but as of right now, you could see how diluted it was at the SEs for sure. The attendance wasn't as much as it usually is, in my opinion. And that's one of the first things I noticed. I was like, wow, it's a little more empty in here than it usually is, because I've been going to them since the medical days. And so that's one thing that worried me. And I realized, how many other competitions do we have these days? Back in the day, we had like maybe 2, 3 at the most. Now there's probably 7, 8,
Right.
and more coming in all the time. So,
And
like,
for us, like to properly, if I'm going to enter a hash contest, I'm making decisions 6 months out.
yeah,
Like we're putting plants in beds that take 100 days.
Mhm.
I got to root them. I got to veg them out. I got to put them in a bed. I got to flower them. If it's GMO, that's 80 more days. I mean, so some of these decisions they're a ways out to take these competitions seriously.
Yeah, I agree. And they do ask a lot of these people, product that needs to be, fronted to them that they're not getting paid for, or sometimes there's product fronted plus a fee. And then what do you get? Just a trophy, or a recognition. Right. And now with, so many, I mean, which one do you listen to? Which one is valued more than the other? Which one is actually the mecca of award and stuff like that, because there's just too many.
Right, I don't want to be in my own micro category. I want to put my shit up against everybody else. Yeah. I just think you should limit how much people can enter, because as a micro, I can't afford to enter 17 samples, maybe 2.
Yeah, that's fair too, because it gets to the point where it's too much. But we can be on this topic all day. Let's get on to the next segment of the show and everything. Thank you so much for telling me more about Carver Family Farms. You guys can find them. You can find them on Facebook, right? Your Instagram got taken down, right?
Yeah, Instagram got taken down. I'm SW Nugget on Instagram.
Okay.
I post how to do stuff. I'm answering questions all the time. We're open source, so I help people and push the living soil mantra out there.
Yeah. Dope. Well, we're going to be talking about that right now in this next segment. So let's go ahead and jump over to this. I'm excited for this. I'm a grower myself. So, this conversation is cool as shit to me. And I've been curious about live soil throughout the years. I kind of wanted to dabble in it, but it seemed like a pain in the ass. But after talking to you, it's just more or less being in tune with the plant versus just trying to tell the plant what it wants. You're letting the plant tell you. So let's dive into it first. So for those who don't know, and we've been talking about this the whole show, and I'm sure some of you figured it out, but maybe someone hasn't. What is live soil? Could you give me a quick rundown on that?
So live soil is basically using the soil as the engine to grow and drive your plant growth. And so I'm more worried about cultivating a healthy soil than I am a plant, because the plant is kind of secondary to the process.
Okay.
Basically, living soil relies on the soil food web, which is basically like a recycling of nutrients via fungus and bacteria and small bugs and composting mites and worms and things like that. And so the biggest difference is not necessarily living soil, but the biggest difference in organics and inorganics is the way it's chelated. Chelated is like the process of breaking something down and making it available to the plant.
Got it.
In salt, you have something like iron or nitrogen that's bound into something, and you're using what's called EDTA. I'm not sure if that's a chemical or a process, but that is what you're using to make that iron or nitrogen then available to the plant.
Yeah.
The difference is when I feed that to a plant, the plant has to take that.
Yeah.
In organics, I'm relying on microbes, fungus, bacteria, worms, and things like that to physically consume the nutrients and then either poop them out or die to make them available. You can also use fulvic acid and humic acid and things like that to break it down and make it available. When it's then available, it's not forcefully available. It's able, like the plant can choose to take it up.
Yeah.
So the biggest difference is the EDTA makes it available or forces it available, and chelating through organics makes it available, or the plant gets to choose whether it takes it or not.
Got it. So one is essentially you're just not a force feed.
It's like waterboarding. You're taking this, and the other one's like a smoothie. Like I might take this if I want it.
Yeah, if I like the taste of it, or if whatever part, it just quenches my thirst.
This life cycle in my growth, like I just finished stretch, I might take a little nitrogen.
Yeah.
Where if you feed nitrogen and salt with EDTA, it's gonna take it in.
Yeah, regardless if it needs it or not.
Right.
And that's where we run into the issues, root lock and stuff like that, or too much, too little, essentially thing. With the live soil, it kind of self-regulates, essentially is what it is. Of course, healthy soil in a balanced system, of course,
Right.
it just recalibrates itself and it figures out what it wants, and that's great. You don't really have to worry about other things, and like you would with hydro. With hydro, it's not as forgiving. Especially with the salts and stuff. With this, it seems a little more forgiving on what you could do, because I've talked. I said, yeah, if a plant's a little pissed off, then the other ones are kind of leave it a little bit, and then it'll come back. The whole
Right.
ecosystem kind of helps it. If it's in the hydro system, it may never come back, because it doesn't have the same support that it has from the fungus and the other bacterias and everything else that's in the soil that you get naturally. Because usually with the salts and stuff, you have to add all that, and even then you have to constantly add it, and who knows exactly what is going on in your soil past that point. You're just adding and kind of guessing. It's like blind feeding, essentially.
Which and you can do that in living soil too. I mean, if you don't really have the best read on your plants, you can just start adding all kinds of stuff. Is it going to affect your plants? Not as much as doing that in hydro. So you kind of have a little bit of a buffer and insurance. But you can make soil that's way too rich and way overfed that your plant isn't going to care too much, isn't going to produce firing all cylinders.
Yeah.
But if you made that same choice in hydro, you would force the plant to be overfed and start to react differently or something like that.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So it's like using the same ingredients to make junk food versus using the same ingredients to make something more healthy for you.
I guess so. And in the end of the day, calcium's in junk food and it's in healthy food. And so that's the biggest argument is they're just elements.
Yeah.
They are. It's calcium at the end of the day. It's just how did you get it to the plant, and did you force it into the plant?
Yeah, exactly. And that makes sense. That's a good way to put it, because I've been curious about the live soil thing, like I said, and just learning all this stuff is great, because this just goes back to growing plants in the wild. Essentially, you're just relying on nature and the natural process, and I love that. So if someone was to go about this, where would they go starting with soil? Is it something I know probably not your backyard picking it out, or bag soil from Lowe's? What's really the best route for people to go to really start?
That's a tough question. I mean, so it just depends on your what you want to put into it financially.
Yeah.
I mean, so the best thing would be to go grab a bag of Build Soil 3.0 and Malibu compost to top dress it and go from there. But that's probably your most expensive route.
Yeah.
The next route would be to just dig a hole in the dirt in the backyard, put some homemade compost and a cup of gypsum in it.
Yeah.
And that's almost free. So there's anywhere in between those two on what you should be doing. So I would recommend to buy a decent organic soil and a calcium product and move forward with that. And try not to grow the plant a little bit smaller than you would think. Like if you're going a 2-gallon pot, don't grow this huge plant. Okay. Because you want to have the soil be the engine of your plant. And
got
it. Bigger the pot, the better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You don't really want living soil to dry out, because then all of your fungal and bacteria and things like that will kind of either go dormant or die off. And they'll come back, but you really don't want that dip of life kind of ebbing and flowing.
So that's why you see these huge beds and not dozens and tons of plants inside of it, because you're allowing the dirt to do the work, not just the roots of the plant.
And the bed, when I top dress the bed, the whole bed gets the nutrients.
Yeah.
And water is actually kind of like a battery in that bed. So if I miss a watering, or if I got 4 or 5 days, where hydro, you got a couple of hours in some situations.
Yeah, that's true. You're a little more forgiving again, on that sense, another reason to do it. So on a home grower's sense, the beds, what do you recommend using beds? I mean, I saw yours, you made them by hand, wood and stuff like that, and you have the little netting under it and all that good stuff, and something, the cloth thing holding it. But what do you recommend, say a home grower, he just wants to start at home, 4 to 12 plants,
Get a 15-gallon grassroots pot. Those are the ones that they're fabric, but they're plastic lined, so the roots kind of go down and force them, and then they'll air prune.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those are a little bit pricey. Like any kind of fabric pot, as big as you can afford, I wouldn't go less than a 7-gallon.
Okay. And do you usually do individual, or are you just talking like a big bed and throw everything in there?
I do individual, especially if you're just learning.
Oh,
Because
okay.
like you might have a plant that gets pissed off, and if it's in a bed or trellised in there, it's hard to remove.
And you know what? That I just thought of this. This also kind of helps you figure out what recipes you really want for the, of course, particular cultivar and for your grower in general. You can kind of a little less here, a little more here, then figure out from there. That's the fun part about growing. Especially when it's at home, you get to experiment and R&D and kind of, well, if we do this, what happens? Or if we tweak this, what happens? Because there's so many different ways to grow cannabis. And this is just another one of them that we can add to it. And to be honest, this might spark more curiosities of people to do it. And to be honest, I might try it in the next couple grow cycles too inside and see where it goes, because like going off of what the plant is reacting versus what you just throw at it, two different things. And I feel more interested in that, and other people might as well too. Like maybe the reason why they haven't gone back to growing or started growing is because they just feel it's just too straightforward in a sense.
Right.
It's like, well, like it can't be like that, and when you add the real science in it, maybe more people are interested, because you add other things in it too, like you showed me some fermented stuff, right? If you
Yep.
if you want to share that, that you add into it. So what are you doing when you're using that stuff?
So my buddy Nick from Portal Provisions, a good friend in Colorado. Him and Miles, Weed Should Taste Good, are all about the use of fermented plant extracts and fermented fruit juices. And so basically, you're taking I'm not like an expert on this. I'm like baby stepping it with the help of some really good friends that are top level in the industry. So don't take this for gospel, but you're taking a plant or a fruit at the time that you are mimicking. So like if you're in veg, you would probably ferment like a comfrey or a grass or something that more mimic the type of growth you want.
Yeah.
And in flower, you're looking for more of like a sweet fruit. And so he had us ferment, I think we had cucumbers, beets, handful of other things. And basically you're fermenting that and it's making a concentrated, almost like a sugar ferment that is going to add life and change the rhizosphere, which the rhizosphere is the root zone, like right at the top level of the plant. And so that's going to kind of change things and help the starches and sugars process and change things into terpenes.
Got it. Okay. So
before we were using gypsum, we still use gypsum. So gypsum is calcium sulfate. Sulfur is a building block of terpenes. And so the sulfate part of calcium is going to help the building blocks of our terpenes. And so my understanding is the sulfate is a building block, and with these ferments, we're going to kind of help the plant push using the building block to maintain and build terpenes.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. How's it work so far for you?
It's one of those, like, it's hard to quantify.
Got it.
Right? Like our labs, I think a lot of them are hit or miss, and like you overlay data, and it's hard to be like, is this? That was one of the biggest things I wanted to get going. When you asked why did I go legal, because I wanted to be like, if I add a cup of kelp in week 5, do I quantify terpenes? And unfortunately, I haven't really been able to use our labs in that frame.
Yeah. No, and I'm with you on that. There's a lot of issues when it comes to testing. And I am one of the people that's kind of big on testing, and I push for it a lot and talk about it. Until we get some standardization with our testing, we're going to run into these issues. And people like you that are relying on the science part of things, like, well, I'm testing this thing, but I need real data and actual real testing and accurate testing for me to get data to my endpoint to see if this is working or not. And that isn't fair. And it's not fair to the consumer. It's not fair to the grower, producer, pretty much everybody, because our first line of defense is that testing. If our testing fails, we're screwed. We're just putting who knows whatever out there, and who knows whatever's in it, because some of the testing, you and I have talked about it, and you've brought it up to me. There's certain numbers in there that don't make any sense even on the terpene side. It's like, why is this number so high? This number shouldn't be high. or these two coincide together, why is it like this? Are you
And
guys,
if the next test is it's gone, I can't be like,
Yeah.
oh, my ferment did that. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like I can't really.
Yeah.
We're doing such small, like this is what I kind of love about having a small grow, and this is what we dealt in our house. We had like an 8x12. We had 4 beds, 4 lights. There's only so much you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I have to, okay, if I add CO2, what did that help? Like I'm literally quantifying grams per square foot.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I only
you
have
have
this much space, and when you're doing hash, like
Mm-hmm.
percentage per gram per square foot. I mean, that's how you're looking at our canopies are 12 by 12.
Yeah.
Right? Like our footprint in 5 different rooms is smaller than one of most people's rooms.
Yeah.
And so we are able to quantify data, I think, more than most people. Because in each room, we have 10 tests.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're telling me, yeah.
There's almost 10 strains in there.
Yeah.
And if stuff goes to, I mean, just of the flowers, probably 10 tests in a room. And so every 16 to 20 days, we're doing 10 tests.
And that gets expensive too on top of it.
$50,000 a year in testing. And when the data isn't where it should be, like that gets really frustrating.
Yeah, no, it is. And the fact that, we have to pay for it, and the fact that the state has a lab that they don't use brand new equipment and everything, and they're not kind of being the example for standardization, it's unfortunate.
I don't mind paying for it. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Like that's our business model.
Yeah.
We are variety. Like I didn't go into this not researching the cost of testing. Like this is what we signed up for. I just signed up for testing to be, if I take it to this lab, I should pretty much get the same results as this lab next door.
Yeah. And what I meant is the state could be a standardization model, like this is our lab. This is kind of how you guys should do yours too.
Right.
Even though they can let them do whatever.
Right now, people are lab shopping, and I'm lab shopping not off of THC. I'm lab shopping for consistency. Like I'll take a low THC if I give it to them every time and it shows up low every time. Cool, that's actual data.
Yeah.
If I give you the same strain and it shows up different every time, like what am I looking at?
Yeah,
we didn't change a bunch.
Yeah, and then I don't know if what I'm doing is the case or if this is just a bunk test. And like we just are getting out of that blue bonnet, situation thing that everyone was dealing with the past, 2 months ago, I think 2.5 months ago.
I could not get their scientists to call me up.
Really?
Yeah. That we got GMO came back at 0.9% terpenes, which is kind of funny because GMO is loud. And then they had our rosin. It came back at 0.9% terpenes, and the rosin had terpenes that weren't in the flower.
Just sprinkling more shit on there. That's weird.
Be extrapolated out from the base material, and it was completely like not in ratios. Not things were there that weren't in this sample, and it made no sense. And I was like, "Will you please have your scientists contact me?" And they weren't able to do that.
Crazy. Before we move on to the next the last topic that we're going to talk about, what are some tips that you can give people for top dressing? We've talked about that a few times. I know you use some organic stuff, but is there anything extra you can give people for tips for that?
Cannabis uses a lot of calcium.
Okay.
And you really can't overuse it. And obviously you can overuse anything, but most of your issues aren't what you're looking at. It's calcium.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, one of the worst things you can do in living soil, and this is from our experience, like I'm not like telling everyone what to do. And in our experience, if you have a root bound plant and you plant it in a existing like healthy bed, it's going to poop out, especially if you overwater it.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you damage the root tip, it like locks out calcium. And calcium is kind of the gatekeeper to everything else.
Yeah.
Calcium and magnesium work in a ratio. So if you lock out calcium, magnesium can't get uptake, and your plant will show as magnesium.
So
purple stems, the yellows and the claws and stuff like that. The mottled, not that calcium splotch. And most people will foliar or try to fix it with Epsom or use magnesium. What you need to do is let it dry back, root tip gets healthy again, calcium comes into the plant, everything processes, you're fixed. And so a lot of the times in living soil, you're looking at a problem that isn't your problem.
Yeah.
Underwatering looks like overwatering.
Got it.
Usually
Okay.
you've overwatered. It's rare you underwater. So if you've overwatered and your plant looks like it's underwatered, you're going to water it again and like compound everything.
Got it. To make it even worse.
The biggest issues are not enough calcium and thinking magnesium is the issue when it's calcium, and it's not actually calcium, it's overwatered. So this goes, think about the root tip.
So this goes to my last question on this. So when it comes to the calcium magnesium thing, should people look for a CalMag or separate it and go straight calcium and keep them separated?
So I'm going to talk about something I don't know 100%. Calcium and magnesium in soil are in a ratio. I don't know that exact ratio, like 10-1 or something like that. And so I do not like to water in with magnesium.
Got it.
Because they don't take magnesium. They'll chew up calcium all day long. Mm-hmm. They don't really do that to magnesium. So Epsom salt is probably our easiest. Foliar is great because you're not affecting the ratio in the soil.
Okay.
If I go to water and Epsom salt, I might change that ratio and screw my calcium up. I don't want to mess with calcium at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In my opinion, that's kind of one of the biggest gatekeepers, things we deal with, like things that kind of control everything else. And so if I add too much magnesium, I might not make calcium available, which will then make magnesium not available. So I don't like to use it. We don't have a CalMag product. If you do buy bagged products, I would recommend Roots Organic. They have a Terp Tea line. There's a Veg and a Bloom and a CalMag. I would use that. Okay. The CalMag is in the ratio you need.
So they know the ratio.
Yeah. We use calcium, which gets things back in ratio.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. That's kind of like where I was going. Is it just calcium by itself, or do you guys have, but that makes sense, especially for the people watching, because some might just add straight CalMag and,
Nope. Gypsum is calcium sulfate, and we use a water soluble version, which means it's pretty much more available more quickly. And then we also use oyster shell flour when we top dress, and that's more of like a gritty texture. So that's going to break down and take longer to be available. So I'm almost adding two forms of calcium, one that's going to be like slow release and one that's going to be more immediate.
Yeah, so you have the longevity with it too, as well, as long
cover your bases. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those out there, please don't steal the gypsum from the white sands. That's federally illegal.
The wrong kind, actually.
It's not the true, right kind. And it's the wrong kind. I was just going to get to that too. And you don't know what's in that gypsum. It's been there for millions of years, and who knows? It's a different type of gypsum that you'd want to add in it anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to add it out there because I'm sure there's going to be one dude that's going to be out there with a bucket trying to get as much gypsum as possible. He's going to get in trouble. So if you're at the white sands, yes, that is gypsum. It's not the gypsum you want, and it's also illegal to take that gypsum from the
side in it too, you know.
Yeah, who knows? It could be nuclear as well from the blast. So, but thank you for that conversation. If you guys have any more questions on the live soil, don't ask me, ask him or someone else, because I'm still learning myself. If you want, go ahead and say your Instagram again if someone has a question. Or
SW Nugget. Yeah, we're open source. We teach people. I'd rather have people get better than frustrated, you know. We saw a lot of clones too, and so like the last thing I want to see is someone take a clone and go home and kill it.
Yeah,
like I want to see someone crush it.
That's fair, dude. There's nothing worse than taking a plant home and then just it dying. You know, like I don't know how many times I've done that from like plants at Lowe's because of whatever reason. But I'm glad that you offer those services. And to be honest, maybe I'm gonna start trying a live soil thing here in the next year or so. So I mean, thank you for the motivation, brother. I'm gonna update everybody real quick on these last two things because the governor did sign two bills: the SB 219 and HB 10, the enforcement bill. SB 219 was a medical psilocybin bill. We've been talking about that one. One thing I do want to update is December 2027 is when the DOH has to pretty much to make the program and stand it up. So we have a couple years to go. But we're going to see this process, and I'll keep you guys informed and updated on what's going to go on. We're most likely going to have rules hearing when it comes to the DOH. They're probably going to ask for a bunch of public input, so that gives us the opportunity to really shape the medical psilocybin program and how it should be. So congratulations. We're the 3rd state in the nation to have a medical psilocybin program behind Colorado and Oregon. So this is great. But keep in mind, just because we're one of the first doesn't mean we're going to be one of the best or one of the ones that does this correctly. This is going to be a learning curve like crazy, and we're going to make mistakes. Let's just hope that we make the right corrections when it comes to those mistakes. HB10 is the other one that was signed. Like I said, that's the enforcement bill. This one ended up having a lot of mixed feelings when it came to the industry. There's a lot of concerns that comes with this. Even I have my own concerns, and other people are kind of bringing up more concerns as the information comes out. Andrew, you and I have actually had conversations on this a few times. I mean,
Yep.
what's your take on the HB10?
Well, at first, we're in an interesting position. We're a micro right down the street from CCD. We've been inspected 9 times, where some of our friends have not seen them once. I'm not saying that isn't like they're the mean guy. Like like you said, we are beyond compliant. That is our goal. Don't go legal. Don't tip your toes into legal.
Yeah.
Right. Like your tail, whatever's not in there is going to get in trouble. So go all in or nothing. And that's what we did. And so it is good for us because we can see what they're looking for and we can know how we can be compliant. But it's awkward knowing that I have friends that have called them like, please come look at our stuff, and they haven't. And so I guess I was taking, that kind of hurts a little bit. Like why, we're the low hanging fruit. Like I have 12 by 12 canopies. Like it's pretty easy to come inspect. We only have 1 product on the floor.
Yeah.
Hey.
It's all right. The furry children had something to say.
The mailman just came by.
He's got his own opinion about it.
Hey, chill. So like our joint tubes, we have one pre-roll sticker.
Yeah.
Right. So like I'm gonna go inspect like Oasis or Dark Matter. What a nightmare.
Yeah, that's true.
Who I would rather go inspect me, to be honest. like 1 sticker, like, hey, you guys need to do this on your pre-roll. Like, so I get it.
Yeah.
And so my original kind of just like opinions were coming from me feeling like we were kind of being looked at differently.
Yeah, no.
And now, like, I saw your podcast with Duke, and now I'm from the, if you were given this authority and you couldn't do this with it, which is to like regulate the huge Native American farm or the lab that never had equipment. Like I paid thousands and thousands of dollars to a lab that should have been pre-inspected. If it was pre-inspected, I wouldn't have paid. They wouldn't have, like, that lost our business a lot of money, and we were only there for a month.
Yeah.
And it wasn't our choice.
Yeah.
And so, like, imagine sticking with that lab for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no help. There was no. So when a customer came to buy something, it said, sorry, this product's been recalled. Yeah. And the state's like, no. It's an administrative hold. Yeah. I don't tell that to the customer who on this BioTrack screen, it says this product cannot be sold due to a system-wide recall.
Yeah.
That makes me look like I'm putting out. Do you know how hard we work to put out clean product? How much
you guys work
cost us compared to other people? How much I pay employees to know what we're supposed to, like? That's the hard part.
Yeah.
And if they can't regulate what they're already given authority over, I don't want to give them police authority.
Yeah. And, we already had the police.
I do. Yeah. Prove you can do this. And then, like, I have to do that. I have to jump through all these hoops.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I've realized too, is that, we give them this police power, but at the same time, the regular stuff that they're allowed to do, they didn't do, or they became this blaming game where the police were saying, no, you have the authority. The CCD is saying, no, you have the authority. And this is back and forth thing. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, when it came to the native one, when it shut down, they figured out the authority thing. And now we're back to this ground zero thing. It's like, well, we don't have the authority. It's like, well, you guys just shut that whole farm down working together. Somehow both of you had the authority. So like, why do we have to create this whole new bureau to do this, hire 10 more officers and, burden the police and, not have the police do the job they're supposed to do? Because we're during the session, we're also hearing sheriffs like, oh, well, this is going to burden us, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's a part of your job. You're just enforcing the law. Like, And so
or you should have said that when the bill was originally written, when law enforcement was supposed to take care of that, because we're 4 years past that.
Yeah, exactly. We're 4 years into this bill passing. It passed in 2021. It also passed, did happen in 2022. Always have to remind people of that. So we're 4 years into legalization, and we're still dealing with that. Like that's a little ridiculous. This whole back and forth thing. I get it. This was supposed to fix that. And even Senator Cervantes, one of the guys who I don't agree with very often, I agreed with him on this. He said, I still believe that the CCD has the authority. He said, but we have to go this route because we had this pissing match between the police and the CCD of blame game of who's who. And he said, I still believe that CCD has the authority. I'm pretty sure we gave it to you, but what do we do if we try to practice it and it's not working? So
or you have I think it was the product with moldy stuff that was never really taken off the shelf.
Yeah,
because they don't have authority to take it off the shelf. I went into this assuming they did. So I'm kind of blown away. So what I'm asking for is things I kind of already thought they had authority to do, not to add more to.
Yeah, me too. And already I'm hearing people tell me, like down in Sunland Park, like, oh, we're having CCD agents come in and tell us that, once the bill passes, they're going to be able to arrest us and take our product and all this other stuff. I'm like, why are you guys, for one, giving empty threats? Because you don't even know if that's going to be the case, because in the bill, it doesn't say that the CCD is going to be the one arresting people.
Right.
It says they will help enforce the law of the CRA, but it doesn't say anything about them having the policing powers that these officers are going to have. Right. They'll be peace officers. They'll be able to do the searches, warrantless search, all that good stuff, but not the inspectors. It doesn't say that anywhere in the bill that the inspectors will also be officers in that sense. So I don't know why they're doing it, but they're also going around, I guess, like driving around parking lots, telling customers, oh, don't worry, we're not here for you, we're here for them, and pointing at the dispensary. Like, that's not cool. Like that's the thing that I was fearful of happening. People getting on a power trip once this bill passed. And I hope that doesn't happen once it comes time, because we're most likely not going to see an uptick of things for a few months. This bill doesn't start until July, or the law. And then they have to train these officers, they have to equip these officers, and then they have to assign these officers.
What about that one that just got busted the other day?
The bill isn't even through. Yeah.
No,
I don't know.
It seems like they didn't have a license. They might have inspected a place that didn't have a license when they were only inspecting pre-light or already licensed places. So that was a move that they hadn't done before.
Yeah, that's true.
See, like that goes back violations or something.
Yeah, like, do you guys have the authority or not? Like make up your minds. And like this bill, the law isn't active yet until July, so I have no clue. Like that's a little weird to me. So that's where I'm getting confused. I'm like, well, where is this coming from? Like, do you or don't you have the authority? So it's a little confusing for us. I get it. I'm not a lawyer, but at the same time, I can read, and what I'm reading isn't really making sense. Right. Maybe I'm just not that good of a reader. I get it. I was educated in New Mexico, but to what I'm reading, it doesn't make sense to what I'm being told. So we'll see what happens. The rollout of this is going to be very important. A lot of the industry doesn't trust authority. It's been a cat and mouse game for a long time between us, and now we're told trust us, but then we're also told, well, we will still fuck you up. And like that doesn't feel good.
Come in that the only way you can have anything done is if you rat on them. If you see an issue, you need to rat on people. And I've said, like, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Like, I come from a time where like I can't do that. Like, I get it. You think I have a business and I'm legal now and I'm gonna go rat on people, but like, you don't do that. And so that's not in my wheelhouse. That's not where we come from. To go and ask a legacy grower to rat on somebody is like, you don't even understand this landscape.
Yeah,
like, I will
and it happens all the time.
Doing illegal shit, even if they're losing me money, because you don't fucking do that. Like, there's a code to this. I wish they would come and ask us questions. I wish they would like use us to help educate them.
Yeah,
I can spot a bottle of Avid or Contos or Spiromephrine or whatever from 50 feet away.
Yeah,
I don't think they know what they look like.
Mm-mm. I mean,
so we're a help to them, and they're like keeping us at arm's length.
Yeah. And a lot of them admit that they don't know enough about cannabis. And even the legislature has admitted they still don't know enough about the cannabis community and industry now. And I'm like, so you guys are making these laws? I was like, that's scary.
What's the
So
answer? Like open panels with CCD with old school growers?
we're supposed to have like a rules hearing, a panel hearing, throughout the year. We give our tidbits and this and that. It hasn't really happened, just like the plant count thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that aren't happening too. So I'm like, okay, you guys are enforcing things, but also not enforcing certain things, and also not doing what you're supposed to do to ensure that this is moving in a certain way. Like, we set this up to work in New Mexico. We didn't set this up because it worked in Colorado or
Right.
wherever. Like, this is the way it works in New Mexico. We want to give feedback, but we're not asking. The last time I heard or saw an area for us to give feedback is when the CCD was doing those rule changes, I think like a year or two ago. And a bunch of us gave feedback because I think they're going to make it illegal for anyone to transfer clones to each other. And it was really stupid. It was like a really dumb rule. And everyone,
Yep.
yeah, you remember that one where they're trying to change that rule? That was the last time, offer a public comment portion when they're supposed to do it. They're supposed to have those board hearings and all that.
Answer a question.
Yeah.
Like, comment one thing. I'm tired of commenting and just going off into the ether. Like, I have a simple question on, hey, can we do this? Or, hey, if we're going to approach this, is this the way to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes they're like, oh, well, we're not allowed to consult you guys, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what are you here for then? To just
then we should
allow
have
me to
like
fuck
a yearly panel where they bring 2 lawyers.
Yeah.
And we can actually
get
get data, because like we are trying to be compliant. And I like, this is so new that like there's questions we have that we don't get answers about.
Yeah. And even a consultant can tell you one thing because they're reading it this way, but the government sees it a total different.
Might not be how they read the same thing.
Yeah. And so you're just like, oh my God, I run into that too. And I'm like, but it doesn't say that, and so like, well, where are you getting this? So yeah, if we had that, I think that would help. And I hope something changes in the future for it and for the positive when it comes to that. And who knows, it might. But as for right now, we'll see what happens. Only time will tell with this. And the HB10 thing is a big change for New Mexico. So those of you out there that are trying to ensure that you make it, just make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. That's the best I can tell you right now. If you're in a situation, a low-hanging fruit situation, I don't know what to tell you on that either, but I do know that this is a learning curve for both sides, and there are going to most likely be lawsuits at some point on both sides, I'm sure, till we figure this out.
The second they leave, operate like they're on their way back in.
Yeah, exactly.
Wear your badge, sign people in with the sign-in sheet, like do everything the way you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I signed in at your place. I wore a badge the whole time. That's what I'm used to. Some places don't do that, but it's not my responsibility to tell you to do that. You're supposed to make me do it. So if you don't do that, I'm not going to say anything. Like, that's not my responsibility. You're the business owner, but you did it right. And I was like, oh, sweet. Hell yeah, I'll sign out. I don't give a shit. Like, it's no big deal. So, but anyway, that's all I have for this week. Andrew, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think actually there is. I think there's a misunderstanding about our current state of medical. And I think the customer is told that there are medical and rec shops, or assumes that. Yeah. And I think it is, medical is now in the mantra of the shop you're shopping with.
Yeah.
And medical, I think, could mean different things to every person.
Yeah.
Right. And so for us, medical means like, we don't charge on THC. Everything's the same price. So if you find something, the price might not change because the THC went up or we grew it differently. Yeah. Or it's the products you offer. Are you offering tinctures, or you're offering mixed cannabinoid gummies? So I don't think, I think we get a lot of people coming in like, do you sell medical? And the answer is, it's all the same thing. Like, what's the mantra of who you're working with?
Yeah. The only difference between medical. What's up?
It's the products that like are geared towards medical.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, lessen the burden of cost on the patient, which are tinctures and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And really, the only difference is the price point. You don't pay tax for one and the other. And I've had dispensaries tell me, well, you are getting a discount. You're getting the medical patient discount. I was like, no, I
Right.
don't pay the tax. That's not a discount. That's different. You're not giving me a discount. You're just not charging me the tax. And to be honest, you should be happy because you're not paying that tax in the end. I'm paying it if I'm paying the tax, but you then have to pay the tax people that actual tax, So like I'm doing you a favor.
Flour's the same, the rosin's the same. I think there's a lot of miscommunication, especially like we have 200 plants, doesn't matter. The bigger guys have to allocate like purchase plants. Do they still like X amount medical and X amount rec? Right?
So everybody has to keep at least 20% of their inventory for medical.
What does that even mean? Do you know what I mean?
So,
like at the end of the day, like how does that actually extrapolate into medical and rec? In my opinion, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't really go into my rooms and be like, okay, 20% medical. That doesn't really equate to.
I think it's finished product. So if you have like, let's say, easy math, 100 ounces, 20% of that would be reserved for medical. So if you're selling a lot and you don't have a lot, you have to keep 20% of that inventory for medical patients.
Wonder if that's happening.
To be honest, in some places, no. In some places, like we're not medical, and I'm like, everybody's medical,
right?
Everybody can, sell to patients. And at the beginning, there are certain places saying like, no, you have to pay taxes even if you're a patient. We're not a medical dispensary. It's like, no, that's not the way it works. If you're a medical cannabis patient in New Mexico, regardless of where you buy it, it's a legal place. You don't pay taxes. They can say they're a rec dispensary all day, but you don't pay taxes. So yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of people out there like, well, which ones are the medical dispensaries? I'm like, all of them. Every patient can go to every dispensary and buy medical cannabis. Now some may offer like 500 milligrams, which you can't buy on the rec side. Like 500 milligram packages and stuff like that. That is for the medical patients. And to be honest, that makes sense and is fair. But yeah, that's the only difference I really know is just higher milligrams for the edibles, and everything else is the exact same. Yeah. So, and that's the access we deserve. So, that's a conversation that we'll keep going on. And I think that's another one that we'll have in the future, because there's just some people that are misunderstanding this medical thing. And to be honest, we're starting to see the numbers kind of start to fight back a little bit, not by much, but hopefully we'll get the numbers back up here in New Mexico for the medical patients and, get people understanding a little more. Right. So
that's all we do is educate. You know what I mean? That's in my opinion, if you own a dispensary or operate retail, your job is to educate.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, the day and the moment you joined this industry, you became an advocate and also an educator. Teach people what you learn. What's wrong with that? That's what I try to do here on this show. So thank you again, Andrew, for joining me. It's been great. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I love that fact that you're also about open source information too. That's the only way we keep this plant going in this community and everything. So keep killing it, brother. You're coming out with some great product, and you're motivating people, and not just on the compliance side, on all sides. So I appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what else you guys got going on. So keep working, and I'll have you on probably try either later on this season or next season, get an update.
Yeah, let me know.
Heck yeah, brother.
Thanks, man.
So, all right. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me this week on this episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Make sure you like, subscribe, whatever you got to do to stay in the know. We'll be back next week with another episode. All right. Shoots. All right, cool. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. We had we connected to another network. We were having some connection issues. So Gino will just edit that out of it and everything.
Yeah, sure, Chad. No problem.
Whip up some magic.
Yeah. Gino